Folks, fuck up nights. No, that's not our next speaker. But we are going to talk a little bit about business plans and startup phrasing and why maybe that's not the right way to go forward with this. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Managing Director of Telluride Venture Accelerator, Marc Nager. Marc, thank you. Good to have you here.
Thanks, Lucas. All right. Hello, everybody. My name's Marc. Wow, that's a big picture of me. I am the actual, why am I here today, actually? I'll give you a little bit of my background. Who here has heard of Startup Weekend, perhaps? All right, so I'm one of the co-founders of Startup Weekend, which is an event series educating entrepreneurs that we started about 9 years ago. The whole idea was, how can we create experiential education for entrepreneurs? How can we show people how to do entrepreneurship, not tell them? I think we all understand it's a little bit more of an art than a science, something you can't learn sitting in a classroom. So Startup Weekend was born. We ended up taking that on a mission to scale around the world. Today it's held in more than 140 countries. About 500,000 people have gone through it. We've had at least 3 $1 billion companies come from Startup Weekend events. It's happened in almost every country except for North Korea, which we all know is a place that could use it. Anyway, we grew Startup Weekend into a parent organization called Up Global. It was a merger with the Startup America partnership where I got to work with the Obama administration on advancing entrepreneurship, specifically in the US and around the world. Steve Case, the founder of AOL, was our chairman of the board there. And then about 2 years ago, we ended up merging with Techstars, where I became an executive with Techstars. Obviously, they have a strong presence here in London and Berlin as well. I was chief community officer there, so spent a lot of time. I've traveled to more than 50 countries. I've worked with Fortune 500 companies, governments around the world, all on this premise of entrepreneurship. So hopefully I can share a little bit do a really quick brief history, and a lot of what I think might be contrarian beliefs. I don't want to stand here and tell you things that you probably have read or could go read somewhere else. I'm going to try to give you some useful statistics about entrepreneurship. Now, I know a lot of folks in the room are from corporations as well. Innovation and entrepreneurship, synonymous, right? Innovation is predicated on the same values, the beliefs of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship. So I'm going to focus on that entrepreneurship piece. So hopefully that's relatable to you, whether you're starting a company, you've started one, you're running one, working in a big company, trying to be more entrepreneurial. Give you a little bit of that. Most importantly, ich bin auch ein Schweizer. Meine Großmutter gewohnt in Andermatt. Sie war dort aufgewachsen, aber mein Deutsch ist nicht so gut. Ich war in Amerika aufgewachsen. So. Das war vor 2 Tagen in Andermatt, an der Goschenen. So, a little bit of history with entrepreneurship. One of the first great examples, obviously trade came, trade money was created. One of the first great business models ever invented, though, was the mill for actually milling flour. If we look around the world, we see, coming from the ancient Greeks, this model. How did that one invention make it almost further faster than any other invention since the wheel? It was really the model that Thales came up with. And it was, he took a percentage of future profits from farmers who he gave the mill to. And that allowed one of the first great franchise models to be invented. Obviously, through trade, exploration was a huge, huge part of it. This was Queen Elizabeth with Christopher Columbus. And then, of course, venture capital, the more modern era of what we now consider entrepreneurship, venture capital, born with George Jorio, obviously a neighbor here. Many of you are also familiar with. And that has really led to a proliferation today of what we call the modern startup founder. That's where I'm going to spend a little bit more time, hopefully debunking some of the myths around entrepreneurship actually involved with it. But as we can see, a lot of this has been enabled with technology trends around the world, things like Barcamp, couch surfing. Who here remembers couch surfing before Airbnb existed, right? Okay, Facebook, obviously the iPhone, all of these platforms, technology has been the key driver of. This is a really funny one. People tend to ask me, is entrepreneurship, is this startup thing, is it a trend? And I found this data, a research report you can get from MTV Insights. Arguably not the most credible resource, but MTV did have an incredible impact on our entire generation living today. Everybody remembers MTV. It's really what helped create pop culture. They went out and they tried to figure out, what are we going to call the generation after the millennials? You know what they came up with? The founders. Now, they have no stake in innovation, startups, entrepreneurship. MTV is calling the next generation the founders. Holy shit. Okay, so this isn't just a trend. It's not going away. It's getting bigger. We're part of something, everybody sitting in this room, that's not going to get any smaller. It's only going to get a lot bigger. So what can we do? And how is that going to change things? I love this statistic, or not really a statistic, but really a fact. Ernst & Young, probably one of the biggest financial institutions, at least on the research side, talking about education. So how do we educate people in the next generation, the founder generation? How do we actually support the creation, the education? Well, universities aren't going to be the best answer. And now we're starting to see a lot of corporations actually do the studies of how much that actually impacts the performance within their companies. It doesn't. So the old models, the systems around education, around universities, around supporting innovation, they're not going to be the same. That's kind of scary. So all of the corporations now today are trying to figure out, what do we do? How do we act differently? Obviously, turning to us. What industries do we need to pay attention to? Even with some questionable looming downfalls on the economy, are we in a bubble? Are we not? I don't know. There's a lot of opportunity that will always be had. I think we can kind of all look at these and say, all right, those tend to be the ones. How is the steel manufacturer going to actually deal with the invention of automated cars, artificial intelligence? Important questions that we all have to ask. And where is the future of entrepreneurship going? I think it's not coming down to how do we support entrepreneurs, really. It's talking more about some critical issues, subcategories within entrepreneurship. I love doing work in Europe and anywhere really outside, including in the US. But diversity is really an issue, right? I mean, look around the room. Most of us are white dudes, right? Women, thank you. Great job. Thanks for coming out. But we have to start to change that, especially in Switzerland, such a diverse country. How do we continue to make sure that the people showing up in the rooms talking about innovation, talking about entrepreneurship, represent the general population in our countries? I think that's really important. The second thing is rural. As we saw with Brexit, as we saw with Trump getting elected, we've got some real issues around the populist movements in the world. Why? In the US, we have over 1,000 counties. Everybody know what a county is, I guess? We have our states, our counties, and then our cities. But we have over 1,000 counties. If you look at the economic growth since the last recession in 2008, all of the growth can be attributed to 52 counties out of more than 1,000. And I think that's the same issue that we see in a lot of countries around the world, is that a lot of the economic value that's being created is not in the rural sector. And traditional industry, the last speaker, obviously a perfect example of that. So I want to give you a few stats about kind of the state of entrepreneurship and how we got here. Interestingly enough, in the US, and I'll give you the source for all this data afterwards, but in World War II, almost 50% of the people returning ended up becoming entrepreneurs, either working for a small business or starting one. Today, we have over 6,000 professors in entrepreneurship. Do you know how many professors in entrepreneurship we had 10 years ago? Probably a couple dozen. So we have an incredible industry built around this. In the US, it's over $2 billion spent on this industry supporting entrepreneurship. Yet there's no evidence in the US that this $2 billion being spent actually can contribute to any positive results, or at least more than normal results for entrepreneurship. Firm formation is actually going down. Well, we might have the founder generation coming up. We might have a lot of entrepreneurship kind of taking the limelight in the media. We actually have firm formation has gone down 200,000 since 1980 to 2016. So we're actually in a really interesting time. The last thing to mention, they also did a study More than 77% of Americans hate their jobs. Not surprising, right? But entrepreneurship, if you actually look at the jobs that people do like, entrepreneurship was by a clear margin the most favorite, most beneficial, and happiest of any vocation. So let's talk about entrepreneurship, startup success rates, because we kind of romanticize this idea of become an entrepreneur, become an internal innovator, right? Let's follow it. So in the US at least, only 75% ever make it past the first year. Okay, so 25. 30% past the 5th year, 70% are dying, and 20% by year 10. So that means you have 4 out of 5 odds of actually dying if you are going to choose the path of entrepreneurship. Now, we try to break that apart between corporations and general entrepreneurs. I think the statistics kind of hold true. They're good heuristics, good rule of thumb. Just to tell you how grim it is, how tough it actually is. One thing that I actually like to look at too, we really push profitability in startups, young companies. The average age of profitability for a company in the US for a startup is actually year 7. Interesting statistic. So what does that say about what we demand out of the entrepreneurs, the business units that we're trying to create? Average age is over 40 years. Average age of an entrepreneur. We have this narrative of the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, right? Being the 25-year-old person working in a garage or in now a co-working space. It's actually the average age in the US of a person who starts a new firm, 40 years old. 80% of people who start new firms in the US are over the age of 35. So the data does not align with the belief of who is actually starting companies. We all understand that it's important. We do have this narrative that coming from a university, everybody should go to university, study entrepreneurship, start a company. That's also an incredible myth. And that's something I challenge all of you to make sure that when we go back out in the world, that we also challenge the world with. Because university students actually make horrible entrepreneurs, statistically. The 5-year survival rate's only 5% in the US. And a lot of this data comes from the Kauffman Foundation. Again, I'll give you a book to go read afterwards. 70% of entrepreneurs earn outside income. We also have this idea of, okay, I'm going to start a business on the side, right? I'm going to be a part-time entrepreneur. That might be actually one of the only statistical things or a piece of advice that I can give any entrepreneur. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, it's full-time, not part-time. It's the kiss of death, statistically, if you're going to be a part-time entrepreneur. So, some fun stats there. Startup competitions. We have Hack Zurich. I'm going to go spend a bunch of time with the teams here later today and tomorrow. So we have 2 different types, kind of the type that happened in the private market, like a startup weekend, what I've been a part of, but we also have like the university business competitions. Rice University in the US is one of the most well-known ones. They have the biggest prize. The winner gets $3 million. Less than 35% of the winners, granted that's coming from pools of thousands of startups and entrepreneurs, less than 35% actually have any type of success. So these competitions we put tons of money and energy into, they don't work. So think about what we're doing at our companies, at our corporations, in our societies, in our schools. It doesn't work. That sucks. That's scary. I don't know what the right answer is, but I want to give you some data at least so we can all figure out the right answer together. Less than 10% of the startups that came from Startup Weekend had any 5-year survival rate. So we have, again, a couple billion-dollar companies that have come from doing thousands of Startup Weekends around the world, but it's really low. So we need to be really careful about romanticizing this narrative of everybody should be an entrepreneur. Here's the book that's coming out in January from the former director of the Kauffman Foundation. Highly recommend it. It's got a ton of statistics. I just chose a few of them out of here, but probably one of the smartest minds who's looked at more data than anybody else on the planet on entrepreneurship and innovation and the success rates of it. So you can pre-order it, I think, on Amazon right now. So some more risks, right? Again, I believe for the first time in history that entrepreneurship is a viable career. Is entrepreneurship actually a career? No, I don't think it is. It's something we can be entrepreneurial, we can have values of entrepreneurs, but we need to be very careful building programs in universities and sending people into the world of entrepreneurship, telling them that you completed this, so now you're an entrepreneur. We need to be really careful of that. So we hear this a lot, keep calm, fail fast. This whole notion of fail fast. There's actually a lot of data around entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs. Surveying them, we often think of entrepreneurs as incredibly risky individuals. The data actually shows entrepreneurs are more risk averse than any other part of our population in the US. They're more risk averse. Why? Because I think once you've already become an entrepreneur, you self-select into it. You see the world a little bit more analytically. You evaluate your options maybe a little more clearly. I don't know. But when we think about failure too, every time somebody fails, are they more valuable? Are they learning constantly? We like to always summarize failures with some beautiful, simple, clear, articulate way to say, oh, that company failed because of this. That startup didn't work because of that. That business unit died because there was no revenue. There wasn't enough, there wasn't the right team, right? But I think that failure with startups is incredibly complex, and we can't oversimplify it. So when we are encouraging people to fail, we don't actually understand what's driving the failure. We often oversimplify the lessons of what actually caused the failure, because often it's many things, not one thing, that cause those failures. So again, we need to be very careful about over-glorifying fail fast. Business plans. This was kind of the crux of it. All of it kind of ties into this, but business plans, maybe the one single way, the common language that we've developed to think about business plans. Where did it come from? Where did business plans actually come from? It was really an invention out of banks and financing institutions to help them understand and mitigate risk. Banks are really good at that, right? Several of you in the room are working for banks. What are you really good at? How many employees do you have dedicated to risk understanding and mitigating risk, right? And what we did is we created this, arduous process of creating a plan. Oftentimes, I think in business plans, that's actually, are the seeds of your own failure. If you look at most of the stories of great entrepreneurs, none of them had plans. None of them wrote really big things and applied for all kinds of grants, and it's just unbelievable. I think the amount of emphasis that we put on business plans when we have it statistically, both objectively and anecdotally, we have a lot of evidence that supports that plans might be a useful exercise to force some good research, some good understanding, some thoughtfulness about your company. But does it actually predict success? No. Here's another one driven by short-term gains from the finance, the venture capital world. Business plans, the average one actually calls for an exit within 5 years because that's what investors want, right? But the statistics actually show it's not until year 11 on average that they either go public or that they have an acquisition of some sort. My advice ends up kind of being boiled down to don't focus on the specific risk as an entrepreneur. Don't overanalyze everything. Anticipate the generic risks. And you have to just understand things at a higher level because you can't control a lot of things. So my question to a lot of you coming to this conference, being part of this innovation conversation, are you an entrepreneur? 3 clear things that I like to challenge people on over drinks. Action versus intent. What have you actually done? If you call yourself an entrepreneur, what have you done? You're not an entrepreneur if you're trying to do something, if you're thinking about doing something. You're only an entrepreneur if you've done something. Just a clear rule I'm trying to draw in the sand. Profit seeking. I started Startup Weekend. It was actually a for-profit. We flipped it into a nonprofit in the US, 501c3, so that we could end up getting a bunch of grant money, including from the European Commission, and helped us grow. It was a business model decision. But this whole proliferation around social enterprise, I think, is a very dangerous thing. Oftentimes what I see, it's an excuse to not have a business model. We have a lot of entrepreneurs out there in the world today trying to make great change. But let's look at the organizations, the corporations, the entrepreneurs who have had the biggest impact in our world. Social impact in our world. All of them started by scratching their own itch, a real problem, a real business, and then they were able to change it. Right? You want to save the whales? Go start a really successful company in the fishing industry with different values. Right? Pursuit of growth. I think that's one thing. There's a difference between small business and somebody who wants to grow a business. So when we do think about innovation, entrepreneurship, the pursuit of growth is an incredibly important aspect of it. So if you can align with these 3 things, I would call you an entrepreneur. Just remember, bad ideas are real. Bad ideas cannot build great companies. This is a smart frying pan. Never has it been so fucking hard to make an egg in the morning. If you've ever used it. Segway, we had Jeff Bezos, we had John Doerr, some of the biggest investors, venture capitalists in the world got behind Segway. They raised almost $100 million, I think, in their first or second round. One of the biggest flops in terms of entrepreneurial stories. They thought it was going to redefine how we think about cities and parking and everything else. They're kind of a funny tourist thing now, right? Types of entrepreneurs. High tech, we've talked a little bit about kind of the fallacy of the high tech entrepreneur working out of the garage, being in their 20s. It's actually, if you look at new firms in the US and what businesses are actually started, it's only 5%. They get almost 99% of the media, but only about 5%, and they have about a 30% success rate at 5 years. The spin-out entrepreneurs actually have the highest success rate of any entrepreneur. This one's an important one for the corporates. We're going to unpack this a little bit this afternoon in my workshop. But spin-out entrepreneurs account for about 15% of new forms being created. On average, they've spent 15 years working in the corporate world, on average 7 years at the specific company they're leaving, the last company they left. So they're actually some of the most loyal employees to corporations that have better ways to do things that spin out, and then they have 40% success rate. Incredible. Those are the entrepreneurs I actually want to spend the most time with, just based on this, because it looks like they're going to be the most. Franchises, replicative, kind of copycat entrepreneurs actually account for the most percentage in the world, 30% for franchises. So franchise, like a food chain or something like that, kind of falls in that. Merchants, kind of more the small business, the retail, and they actually have the lowest success rate when we think about types of entrepreneurs. A few other key things that I've learned I want to make sure to share with you. Mentors are like mushrooms. Working at Techstars, I actually run an accelerator program right now. We've built a lot of emphasis in corporate innovation programs, in accelerator programs, in incubators, and universities around mentors. Mentors can be great. Mentors can be horrible. I think I've seen more mentors kill businesses than actually help businesses. But we've created these structures where entrepreneurs are told, okay, if somebody comes in the room, listen to them, whatever they say is going to be good. And then they turn around and they get different advice. And then they turn around and get different advice, right? So mentorship is actually a valuable part of the entrepreneurial journey, but we need to be careful about how we set up our entrepreneurs, our innovators, when we're pairing them with mentors, getting advice, and the expectations that we place on that relationship. There's a lot packed in this slide. You can only learn by doing. I'm going to go through this one quickly. You all can read. It's not for kids. Entrepreneurship, I'm an exception, I guess. When I started a company, statistically, everybody's older than I am and smarter than I am, too. Good companies don't happen overnight. We have a lot of models that are predicated on 3 to 5 year venture returns. As an investor now, as somebody who plays in the angel investment kind of world and accelerator world, you have to change your time horizons. Actually, venture capital is pretty irrelevant. If we look, if it takes 14 years to go to IPO, if we actually look back on the Inc. 500, the 500 fastest growing companies in the US in 2004, only 7% ever took any venture capital money. Wow, okay. So 14 years, average time to hit success. We look back, only 7% of today's successful companies, ever took venture capital. So we need to be careful about how much input or how much leverage we take from the venture capital models. Being a single founder CEO is actually accounts for the biggest percentage of successful businesses. Over 20-year longitudinal study that Kaufman did. Most entrepreneurs end up getting fired from their own companies. Why? Because you have to become a great manager. You have to manage people. I like to say business is easy, people are hard. That's something we all have to deal with on a daily basis, I think. Getting a cold circle, that's another one of the most valuable things. Do you have this? I'm kind of using this hopefully to prompt you guys to think about your situations, your programs. Do you have a lot of these things? If not, let's talk afterwards. So luck. What role does luck play in the world of entrepreneurship? Arguably a lot. So if we don't really know a lot about it, the programs that we've all built and spent billions of dollars around, if all of those don't work, it must just be luck, right? Well, I don't know. We can engineer for luck if I have to think about how to try, right? Some people are more lucky than others. So collect facts. I think the more facts that you have at your fingertips, the more data you have to make better decisions. So think about not just your immediate facts, think about the world around you, I think is the most important thing. Building valuable social networks. So many of those great stories came from I knew a friend who knew a friend, introduced me to so-and-so, and that became my first customer. You know, whatever that is. Making opportunity out of accidents. Again, glass is always half full for most entrepreneurs, being optimistic. And most of the time, the great success comes out of the hardest, the most trying times that any of them face. So then, as an entrepreneur, as somebody who's now in the investment seat, how do we then actually predict success? There's a lot of data. You can do personality typing. You can ask for business plans. You could do any sort of kind of analysis. The analysis I've kind of boiled down to is, okay, all the science kind of sucks. We don't really know how to predict success. So if I'm going to use a few heuristics, these are the ones that I use. Number one, is it a good idea? Do other people think it's a good idea, namely potential customers? Is this person motivated? Are they willing to do whatever it's going to take at all costs? Anything that's legal, at least, right? Experience. Do they have the right type of experience to inform them, either themselves or on their team, right? Back to the spin-out entrepreneurs. That's a huge, huge part of this. The ability to learn and adapt, obviously. Do they have a history of having things happen in their life? A lot of entrepreneurs actually have had, their families, their parents have divorced, or they've faced some personal challenge in their lives. So looking at the personal challenges as well as the professional ones that they've already faced. That's essentially what I think I've boiled it down to. So far, so good. If you take away one thing about innovation, about entrepreneurship, the science really shows that despite billions of dollars, despite some of the best minds in the world thinking about this, nobody really knows how to produce better innovation, more successful, even producing innovation that's less likely to fail. But I do know how important entrepreneurship is. I do know how important it is to our generation, to the next generation, to solving some of the next big problems we have in the world. So we're all kind of lost. So I enjoy you. Just be constantly curious about the world around us and about the facts. There are no 10 ways to start a business or become an entrepreneur or produce true innovation. So thank you guys very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the excellent presentation. I want to open up the round to questions. I just have one quick question first. Cold cycle. What is a cold cycle?
Cold circle.
Oh, cold circle.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay,
yeah.
Perfect. I must have misread that.
Is it a?
I think I misread that.
Cold circle. Having people who can challenge you, right? We all have those people we've encountered in our lives. I often like to say and advocate to entrepreneurs, do not have people that are invested into your business. They need to have zero incentive. They just need to give you, the no bullshit reaction to what you're doing, how you're making progress. They need to be that great, mirror that you
stepping away from that echo chamber, I guess.
Exactly. And if you don't have that, and if you haven't formalized that as an entrepreneur, as somebody in innovation, you're always gonna get the pats on the back, the false encouragement, I call it.
Yeah, that's a great. I would take that idea. Here, $20. You want to buy it? It's like we'll see.
Yeah, exactly. Great idea. Yeah. Do you want to buy
awesome. It? No. Cool. I want to open up the round. I see the catch cube is in there. Who would like to ask some questions? Perfect. Just one over.
Okay. I haven't seen it. Maybe I missed it. But do you have any data on, let's say, how hard you work? For example, my father was an entrepreneur, and I barely saw him when I was a child. But does that correlate with some success or failure rate? Probably being lazy is not such a good success.
You probably answered it right there, yeah.
Yeah, but
it's a lot. I don't know, but some of the best entrepreneurs I know are the best delegators. They're the most strategic. The work harder, not smarter adage, I think, really plays there. Or work smarter, not harder. Sorry.
Good, perfect. Do we have any other questions?
Questions about what you guys are working on?
Oh, yeah. In the back. Yeah, sorry. Just toss it. Ooh.
Okay, so I made some innovation, and then I went for a US patent. How do you think about patent management?
The patents, patents are tough. It depends on what you're working on, honestly. If you've already validated that you have real customers, that it's a process that a box that you have to check. So as long as you know you already have something that you need, the legal fees of getting a patent in most cases are well worth the cost, and especially if you're working in a corporation. That said, I wouldn't hold back any part of the business, almost any part of the business, until it's done. So I'd keep going with other aspects.
Is there any correlation between patents and entrepreneurship and success rates?
There's actually no, there's not, and that's in the book as well. The patents actually have become less and less correlated with entrepreneurial success over time. I don't know what the numbers are, but Carl hits them in the book.
You said the book is coming out still.
In January.
In January. Okay.
Yeah,
did you pre-read the book, or how did
I pre-read the book.
Okay.
An editor of the book. I've been using a lot of the statistics for a while. It's nice to see them all in one place.
Because the Kauffman Foundation really is the source for these sort of things.
Yeah,
for my bachelor thesis, actually.
Yeah,
I want to open up to some more questions. Maybe in the front. Gets people moving.
Yeah.
Hi, thanks so much for your talk, first of all. So you had mentioned that there was a study done about the correlation between people that have gone to university and the performance in the workplace, and that not being what we expect it to be. What would you say is the best alternative kind of education or experience that you would encourage entrepreneurs to have so that they have better performance in the workplace?
Go get a job at a company. Spend on average 15 years there, then start a company. I think that's the #1 advice to anybody graduating who wants to become an entrepreneur. I do also believe that accelerators are filling a big void. So if you're working on a company today, I think accelerators end up being almost more effective in education than they are in the actual investment. For most accelerators, I think you kind of have the Ivy League, the Harvards, the Stanfords of the world with some of the accelerators, but for most of them, I think they're doing a great job educating the next generation.
They can start issuing degrees too. That'd be cool.
Right? At least they've flipped the economics.
Right.
So in the U.S., we have to pay $100,000 to get a good education.
Right. They would pay you. Actually,
now the accelerators pay you. So there's something that's working
cool
there.
Business model right there, right? We talked about nonprofits in that sense.
Yeah.
Perfect. Do we have any other questions? Anybody else working on a cool idea? Actually, one question I have to you regarding that. So you're on the investor side now a little bit as well. Yeah. So do you use these statistics when you see a team to kind of filter a little bit? I mean, because if I'm just running the numbers, right, I have 1,000 applications. I have the parameters, and I kind of run this to see, and let's say it's, these are the success factors that are more likely. Do you kind of screen based on that as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. What age they are. More diverse teams are statistically more successful as well. So we're looking at diversity, we're looking at age of founders, we're looking at experience within corporations. Those are probably some of the big ones. And then we're using a lot of the statistics as well around team, because I think once you've identified a market and an idea, it comes down to the people. And so we look at a lot about the team failure rates. Noam Wasserman, who wrote a great book through his studies at Harvard called The Founder's Dilemma, if any of you are interested. He accounts 85% of all startup failures to team issues, co-founder conflicts within the management team. So it actually says once you've identified, created a startup, the #1 reason that you're for failure is actually going to be because of people issues.
Because of human issues. And out of curiosity, when you do Techstars as well, if I caught that correctly?
Yeah, I'm an entrepreneur in residence at Techstars, so I'm helping them think about what the future looks like. And then about a year ago, I left now to jump in and working in a tiny little town of 3,500 people.
Cool.
In Colorado.
Where in Colorado?
Telluride, Colorado.
Telluride.
It's the closest thing I could find to Andermatt in the States.
Oh, okay. A friend of mine went to college in Boulder, so I love Colorado quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. Do we have any other questions? Oh, perfect. Yep.
I think self-awareness is the #1 thing. We do a lot of screening for that kind of self-awareness when the people are coming in. If people are really aware of their strengths, their weaknesses, and how they work with their co-founders, you can get that pretty quickly in a casual conversation. But once you've actually identified it, I haven't figured out ways to rectify it. You know, there's therapists that are probably better qualified for doing that, but I'm not in the business of, I guess, being a therapist.
Therapist in residence. Yeah, that's a new job title right there.
A lot of investors, you know, accelerators end up being, you know, somehow psychological support for entrepreneurs. Yeah, but I don't know if there's a successful way to do that.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Do we have any other questions? Yep, in the back. Just you can toss the cube back and. Yeah.
Thank you. Have you made any correlation between entrepreneurship and endurance sports people? They know how to face pain and like Ironman, and so you would at least know that they can go through heavy pain. And
one of my colleagues was actually the head coach of the U.S. men's and women's Olympic ski teams for about a decade. And they did a lot of study on the science of how do we recruit people into, specifically in this case, skiing, but it's the Olympic Committee actually does obviously a lot. But the recruitment efforts, just like entrepreneurship, they've proven actually aren't very effective. So all the way from junior sports to, you know, professional athletes, the processes, the statistics actually show most of the greatest athletes come from outside the process somehow. So we spend a little bit of time talking about that.
And I guess not many how many Ironman winners have gone on to compete and build great companies?
I guess, yeah, I don't know. Maybe there's a values thing that's similar there.
Yeah,
the dedication, the motivation, the ability to get through anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
So.
Do we have any other questions in the audience? Yep, perfect, right. Oh, yeah, that not a far throw.
Hi there. So my dad was the co-founder of the alternative bank in Switzerland. And actually right now he wants to do that, but globally. So like a social bank, but globally. Do you think there's any chance this would be successful?
Oh, wow, big question.
Yeah, we started off easy, but now we're getting to the real question.
Statistically, it's going to be really hard, I'll tell you that.
Well, he has experience.
I mean...
Just wait for the next question.
Look, everybody likes to talk about the social enterprise angle, and I think it comes down to the market. The market's going to decide. If your values as an organization and the impact that you want to have as an organization aligns with the values of your customer base, it's going to work. It's why we all buy in the US, it's organic. Here it's bio, right, products. But shifting values will drive the marketplace, will drive better outcomes. So, especially as we become more socially conscious.
And do you invest in such a company? As you're now on the investor side?
We don't invest in the fintech companies, so not part of our thesis. That would be the only reason to, yeah.
And I think it always depends on the individual case as well, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
The complexities behind a social business, they're not you know, natively bad or good in the sense that they can be very profitable.
Yep.
You know, in many ways, there's a lot of companies in India actually that are doing really, really well on both sides of the coin.
Yep.
Drip Tech, for example, is one. They do irrigation systems for farmers, poor side in India. And they actually make quite a bit of money, but they really help also quadruple or, you know, quintuple actually farm output. So that really works on both sides, and that's actually a very lucrative business.
Well, I think look around the world, right? Where have the world's biggest philanthropists come from? Actually, philanthropy itself was an invention from, I think, a competition between Carnegie and Rockefeller about who could give away their money the most effectively.
Carnegie Hall.
And so they built big libraries, big
Carnegie
institutions, and they happen to have a great social impact. But that was kind of the advent of it, and then hence we had a tax structure then to support it later on, and look at, you know, where is almost 80% of the dollars are coming from like 5 people or something. Bill Gates, now it's Zuckerberg, and you know.
Yeah, the Giving Pledge, I think, is one of the things they
Giving
worked out.
Pledge, a lot of the PayPal guys, yeah. So it's really interesting that none of those people actually started with a social enterprise in mind, but they're having
kind of looped around, you know, on the second turn.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's a bad thing to be a social enterprise. I'm saying if you really want to create change in the world, people always ask about building startup communities, innovation communities. Leading Startup Weekend, we worked with thousands of volunteers who led Startup Weekend. They were the ones who made it happen. They always said, what's the one thing I can do to build a startup community? I said, go start a successful company. It's not run a better accelerator, run a better incubator, start a better co-working space. Those are important infrastructure items. But the most impact you can have is actually being a successful entrepreneur yourself.
Perfect. Do we have any other questions? Perfect. Well, in that case, I want to say thank you very much for coming out here and sharing this with us. We really appreciate it. Guys, a round of applause, please. And then, oh, hold on. We're not going to send you away here without a stylish bag and the sounds to go with it. But thank you very much for coming out here. You'll be around afterwards for lunch.
Absolutely.
So, ask any questions.
I've got some frameworks and stuff for any of you corporate innovators. Worked with a number of folks taking some of what we've learned inside corporations.
Yeah.
About a dozen workshops now, and I'll share some of that.
You're actually doing a workshop later today.
Yeah.
Well, right. Yeah, so please do go out to the...
All right.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Round of applause, folks.